Ashen Blythe Montemayor stood in front of the full-length mirror in his lavish penthouse bedroom. The pale morning sunlight filtered through the glass walls, highlighting his sharp features that seemed to have been sculpted by the gods themselves. His face was a masterpiece, a flawless jawline, almond-shaped eyes that glimmered like onyx, and lips that held an enigmatic curve, neither too cold nor inviting. His raven-black hair, always immaculately styled, framed his porcelain-like skin. At 25, Ashen carried an air of regality and mystery, one that made people turn their heads in awe and trepidation. But behind those perfect features lay a heart burdened with cynicism and guarded by walls thicker than any fortress. Once, at 18, he had been the embodiment of joy. His laughter had echoed in the grand halls of the Montemayor mansion, his charm effortlessly lighting up every room he entered. But life had a cruel way of reshaping people. The boy who once believed in the magic of love and the promise of forever had vanished, replaced by a man who now viewed emotions as liabilities. "Sir Ashen," a voice called from the doorway, interrupting his thoughts. It was his personal assistant, Liza, a sharp and efficient woman in her early 40s who had served the Montemayor family for over 2 decades. "Your schedule for today is packed. The board meeting is at 10, and the charity gala committee is expecting you at 4. Ashen turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Cancel the charity meeting." Liza blinked, momentarily thrown off. "But sir, the Montemayor name is—" "I said cancel it." Ashen cut her off, his tone icy but not raised. He had a way of commanding authority without theatrics. "I have more important things to attend to." Liza hesitated but nodded. "Understood. Is there anything else you need?" Ashen walked to the window, overlooking the bustling city below. The world seemed so distant from up here, as if he were watching it all through a detached lens. "Yes," he said after a pause. "Schedule a meeting with Dr. Estrada at the fertility clinic. I'll need to finalize the surrogacy arrangements." Liza's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked her surprise. "Of course, sir. I'll see to it immediately." She left the room without another word, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Left alone, Ashen allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. His reflection in the glass betrayed the slightest hint of weariness. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind drifting to memories he'd rather forget. The laughter, the warmth, the heartbreak. Ashen had been 18 when he first fell in love. His name was Lucian, a popular figure in their elite private university. Lucian had been everything Ashen admired, confident, magnetic, and untouchable. For a young Ashen, it had been impossible not to be drawn to him, like a moth to a flame. He had spent months gathering the courage to confess his feelings, but that courage had led to humiliation. Ashen still remembered the scene vividly. Standing in the center of the crowded university courtyard, he had poured his heart out to Lucian, only for Lucian to laugh and call him delusional. "You think someone like me would ever be interested in someone like you?" Lucian had sneered, his words cutting deeper than Ashen thought possible. The laughter of their peers had echoed in his ears, each chuckle a reminder of his foolishness. From that moment, Ashen had sworn off love, convinced that no man would ever see him for who he truly was. To them, he would always be a target for ridicule, a naive Montemayor-are unworthy of genuine affection. Ashen's phone buzzed, pulling him back to the present. He glanced at the screen. It was a text from Liza. "Dr. Estrada is available tomorrow at 2 p.m. Shall I confirm?" He typed back a curt response. "Yes." Placing the phone on the table, he sighed. The decision to have a child had been a calculated one. Love might have betrayed him, but the idea of family, of a legacy, was something he couldn't abandon. He didn't need a partner to create a family. Modern science had given him the tools to bypass the complications of relationships. A surrogate would carry his child, and he would ensure that child had everything they needed to thrive. No emotions, no heartbreak, just control. The next afternoon, Ashen found himself seated in the pristine office of Dr. Estrada, one of the country's leading fertility specialists. The room was tastefully minimalist, with soft beige walls and a few abstract paintings. Dr. Estrada, a poised woman in her 50s, greeted him with a warm smile. "Mr. Montemayor, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," she said, extending her hand. Ashen shook it briefly. Thank you for accommodating me on such short notice. Of course, your assistant provided me with the details of what you're looking for. I must say, surrogacy is an excellent choice for someone in your position. It offers control and clarity, both of which I'm sure you value. Ashen's lips twitched in what might have been a smirk. You've done your homework. Dr. Estrada chuckled. It's my job. Now let's get started. Do you have any specific requirements for the surrogate? Ashen leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. She must be healthy, of course. No history of genetic disorders. Ideally, someone who values privacy and discretion. I don't want any complications. Understood, Dr. Estrada said, jotting down notes. And as for the egg donor, we have profiles of women who are not only physically healthy, but also academically and creatively gifted. Would you like to review them? Ashen hesitated for a moment before nodding. Yes, send me the profiles. I'll make the decision personally. Dr. Estrada handed him a tablet with a curated list of potential donors. As Ashen scrolled through the profiles, he couldn't help but feel a pang of detachment. This was supposed to be the start of something monumental, yet it felt clinical and hollow. After a few minutes, he set the tablet down. I'll get back to you by the end of the week. Take your time, Doctor, Estrada said. This is an important decision. Ashen rose from his seat, buttoning his suit jacket. Thank you, Doctor. I'll have Liza coordinate the next steps. As he left the clinic, the weight of his decision settled on his shoulders. This wasn't about creating a family out of love or companionship. It was about legacy, about ensuring that the Montemayor name endured. And yet, as he stepped into his car and the city blurred past the tinted windows, a tiny voice in the back of his mind whispered a question he couldn't ignore. Would this child be enough to fill the emptiness inside him? Back at the penthouse, Ashen poured himself a glass of whiskey, letting the amber liquid swirl in the crystal tumbler. The city lights glittered outside, but they brought him no comfort. He thought of his parents, of their fiery but destructive love. His father had adored his mother, but their relationship had been a tempest, full of passion and pain. Watching them had convinced Ashen that love was not worth the cost. He sipped the whiskey, the burn grounding him. No attachments, he murmured to himself, no complications. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from an unknown number. The text was simple but unsettling. Love is not something you can outrun forever, Ashen. He frowned, immediately forwarding the message to Liza for investigation. As the night stretched on, the message lingered in his mind, a shadow he couldn't quite shake. For now, he would focus on what he could control. Love might have betrayed him, but he wouldn't let it dictate his future. This time, he would write his own story, one without heartbreak, without vulnerability. Just him and the child who would carry on his name. But deep down, a part of him couldn't help but wonder, was it truly possible to live without love? Or was he only delaying the inevitable? The sleek interior of the high-end restaurant in Bonifacio Global City gleamed under the soft golden lights, exuding a calm and luxurious atmosphere. Ashen Blythe Montemayor sat stiffly in his chair, his perfectly tailored grey suit complementing his sharp features. His chiseled jawline and piercing eyes, a mirror of Cha Yunwoo's perfection, drew attention from passers-by. Yet he remained detached, seemingly uninterested in the bustling crowd around him. Opposite him sat Chiara Mendoza, her fiery red hair falling over her shoulders as she sipped her iced coffee. She'd known Ashen since they were teenagers, and though his cold demeanor often intimidated others, she'd long since learned how to break through his walls. Ash, you really called me out for lunch, and haven't said a single thing. Chiara teased, resting her chin on her hand. Spill. What's on your mind? Ashen exhaled, his gaze falling to the untouched glass of water before him. I've been thinking about starting a family. Chiara nearly choked on her drink. Excuse me? Did I hear that right? You, Ashen Blythe Montemayor, want a family? He shot her a look that silenced her laughter. Not in the way you're thinking, he clarified. I'm considering surrogacy. Her eyes widened in surprise. Wow, that's unexpected. I mean, it's not a bad idea, but Ash, are you sure about this? I've thought about it, he replied, his tone steady. Love isn't for me. It's too messy, too painful. I don't want a partner. I just want a child to carry on the Montemayor name, someone who will grow up without the illusions of love clouding their judgment. Kiara leaned back in her chair, her expression softening. Ash, I miss the old you. The guy who used to smile so much that people thought he didn't have a care in the world. You were happy once. People change, Kiara, he said, his voice tinged with finality. You of all people should understand that. She reached out and placed her hand over his. I do understand, Ash, but it hurts me to see you like this. You've built these walls around yourself, and I know it's because you've been hurt. He didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the table. Kiara's lips twitched into a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed her sadness. You know, no matter how distant you get, you'll always be my best friend. You're family to me. The corners of Ashen's lips lifted slightly in what could barely be called a smile. Thanks, Kiara. The moment of quiet camaraderie was interrupted when Ashen's posture stiffened. His grip on the water glass tightened, his knuckles turning white. Ash? Kiara followed his gaze toward the entrance of the restaurant, her curiosity turning to alarm when she saw his expression. His usual indifference was replaced by a flicker of pain and anger, only to be masked seconds later by his cold, emotionless facade. She turned to see what had caught his attention and froze. Lucian Blackwood. Tall, striking, and exuding an air of arrogance, Lucian entered the restaurant with a gorgeous woman clinging to his arm. His jet-black hair was styled perfectly, and his designer suit seemed tailored to emphasize his powerful aura. Lucian Blackwood, the man who had once shattered Ashen's heart, was now casually walking toward a table as if the world owed him everything. Kiara's blood boiled. Her memories dragged her back to university, to the day Ashen had baked a chocolate cake for Lucian. It was Ashen's way of confessing his feelings, but it had gone horribly wrong. Flashback, university days. The scent of freshly baked chocolate filled the small campus bakery where Ashen nervously stood, holding a carefully crafted cake in his hands. The words, I like you, were written in delicate chocolate frosting. His heart raced as he approached Lucian, who was surrounded by his usual group of friends. Lucian, Ashen said, his voice trembling, I made this for you. I like you. For a moment there was silence. Then Lucian's lips curved into a cruel smirk. Are you serious? Lucian said, taking the cake. He looked at it, then at Ashen, before laughing loudly. You actually thought I'd like someone like you? Ashen's face turned pale. You're delusional, Lucian sneered, raising the cake and smashing it into Ashen's face. Stay away from me. I don't want anything to do with a disgusting freak like you. Laughter erupted around them, students mocking and pointing at Ashen. Tears blurred his vision as humiliation and heartbreak overwhelmed him. Ash! Kiara appeared out of nowhere, shoving past the crowd and pulling Ashen away. Let's go. Ashen broke down as soon as they were out of sight, his sobs racking his body. Why, Kiara? Why would he do that? Kiara held him tightly, her own heart breaking for her best friend. He's not worth it, Ash. We'll transfer to another university. You'll never have to see him again. Present day, Kiara's grip on Ashen's hand tightened. Ash, are you okay? Ashen's voice was devoid of emotion. I'm fine. Are you sure? She pressed. Seeing him again, it must. I said I'm fine, he cut her off, his tone icy. I'm not interested in that bastard anymore. Kiara studied his face, searching for any cracks in his stoic mask. Ash, it's okay to feel something. You don't have to pretend with me. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. I've moved on, Kiara. He's nothing to me now. Before she could respond, a waiter approached to take their orders, breaking the tension. As Kiara placed her order, she couldn't help but glance back at Lucian, who was now laughing with the woman at his table. She wished she could erase every trace of him from Ashen's life, but she knew the scars he'd left ran too deep. When the waiter left, Kiara leaned forward, her voice low. Ash, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. Always. Ashen nodded slightly, his gaze distant. Thanks, Kiara, but some things are better left in the past. She wanted to argue, to tell him that burying his feelings wouldn't heal him, but she knew better than to push him. Instead, she reached across the table and gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "Let's order dessert," she said with forced cheerfulness. "Maybe something chocolate?" For a brief moment, the corner of Ashen's lips twitched upward in a faint smile. Why not? Lucian was seated at his table with the woman on his arm, but something caught his attention. A man sitting far across the restaurant, exuding an aura of cold detachment, stared directly at him. Lucian's eyes locked on the figure, and his smirk faltered. There was something familiar about the man. His beauty was undeniable, far surpassing even that of the woman sitting beside him. Who is he? Lucian thought, narrowing his eyes as he studied the stranger. The man's face was flawless, like it had been sculpted by an artist, but it was his expression that intrigued Lucian most. Those cold, piercing eyes looked at him as if he were the most despicable person in the world. Lucian smirked in return, trying to shake the strange feeling building in his chest. He leaned closer to his companion and whispered something in her ear, but his gaze kept drifting back to the man across the room. Why do I feel like I know him? And why does he seem to hate me so much? His curiosity was piqued, though he reminded himself of his identity. I'm straight, 100%. There's no way I'd be affected by some guy, no matter how striking he looks. But the haunting image of the man lingered in his mind. Across the restaurant, Kiara noticed Lucian's lingering stare. She leaned toward Ashen, lowering her voice. Ash, he's looking at you. Ashen's jaw tightened. I know. Do you think he remembers? Kiara asked hesitantly. Ashen's gaze flicked back to Lucian for a moment before he turned his attention back to Kiara. Maybe. But it doesn't matter. Let's go. I don't want to stay here. Ash, are you sure? We don't have to leave if... I said let's go. Ashen interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. Kiara nodded and stood, grabbing her bag. As they made their way out of the restaurant, Ashen's steps were measured and steady, but his heart raced. He could feel Lucian's eyes burning into his back, and he hated how it made him feel vulnerable again. Lucian's gaze followed them as they left. He couldn't take his eyes off the man's retreating figure, the way his broad shoulders moved with quiet confidence. He didn't know why, but the man's beauty and the coldness in his eyes was haunting him. Lucian? Are you even listening? His companion asked, her tone tinged with irritation. Yeah, he lied, though his mind was far from their conversation. Who is that man, and why can't I stop thinking about him?